Today, we're digging into the complex, often fraught history between the United States and Iran. Now, you see the headlines, right? But what if I told you the real story, the actual root of all this conflict, is a secret history that most of us have never even heard about?
Yeah, language like that pretty much sums it up, doesn't it? For decades now, the whole relationship has been framed by this kind of open hostility and, just this incredibly deep mistrust.
And if you ask most people where all this started, they'll point right here, 1979, the Islamic Revolution, the overthrow of the Shah, and of course, the US Embassy hostage crisis. It feels like ground zero, the absolute beginning of the conflict we know today.
But is that where the story really begins? What if 1979 wasn't the cause, but actually the effect, a reaction to something else entirely? What if the real turning point, the event that planted all the seeds of this animosity, happened decades before anyone was even thinking about a revolution?
Let's go there. To really get what's going on now, we've got to rewind. Way back. Not to 1979, but to 1951.
And to understand 1951, you've got to understand this man, Mohammad Mossadegh. Now, he wasn't some radical cleric or a military general. No, he was the democratically elected prime minister of Iran, and he was a big deal on the world stage, Time magazine's Man of the Year.
Mossadegh had one big goal, and it was simple, but it was also incredibly revolutionary for the time. He wanted to nationalize Iran's oil industry. He just wanted to make sure that Iran's greatest natural resource actually benefited the Iranian people, not some company halfway across the world.
So why was that such a radical idea, nationalizing your own oil? I mean, it sounds pretty reasonable, right? Well, to get it, you have to look at the deal that had been in place for the last 50 years. And folks, it was something else.
It all started way back in 1901. A British entrepreneur, William Darcy, got this 60-year concession for nearly all of Iran's oil. Then boom, they discover one of the largest oil reserves on the planet. And who swoops in to buy the concession? The British government itself. That company would eventually become BP. So for half a century, Britain basically controlled Iran's oil.
And just look at the profit split from that deal. It is staggering. Iran got a measly 16% of the profits from its own oil. The other 84%, that went straight to the Anglo-Persian Oil Company, and by extension, to Britain.
And get this, for signing away control of its most valuable resource for 60 years, what did Iran get up front? A lump sum of 20,000 pounds. I mean, just think about that, 20,000 pounds for what would become the lifeblood of the British Empire. It's no wonder people felt like their future had been sold out from under them.
So Mossadegh looked at all this and saw it for what it was, a massive, historic injustice. He believed that with those oil revenues, Iran could build a modern nation. They could fight poverty, disease, you name it. For him, nationalizing the oil wasn't just about money. It was about national dignity and a better future for his people.
Okay, so that leads us to the coup. Because Britain, they saw things very differently. Their entire empire, their economy, their royal navy, it all ran on that cheap Iranian oil. Mossadegh's plan wasn't just an inconvenience, it was a direct threat to their power. And they were absolutely not going to let that happen.
So, what did they do? First, they tried to squeeze Iran economically with a crippling oil embargo, but Mossadegh wouldn't budge. So Britain went to its biggest ally, the United States, and asked for help to overthrow him. Now at first, under President Truman, the answer was no, but then a new administration came in. President Eisenhower was worried about the Soviets, and in 1953, the US agreed to get involved. The CIA and Britain's MI6 started planning.
And let's be crystal clear about the goal here. This isn't speculation or some conspiracy theory. We have the declassified CIA documents now, and the objective was stated right there in black and white. Effect the fall of the Mossadegh government and replace it with a pro-Western one, plain and simple.
And in August of 1953, they pulled it off. Operation Ajax was a success. Mossadegh's government was overthrown, he was arrested, imprisoned, and then spent the rest of his life under house arrest. And this is a really crucial piece of the puzzle. This was the first time the CIA ever orchestrated the overthrow of a foreign government. It set a precedent.
So, Mossadegh is gone. Problem solved, right? Well, not exactly. In fact, you could say this is where the real problems began. The coup set off this massive chain reaction, a series of dominoes that are still falling today.
See, with Mossadegh out of the way, the US put the Shah back in power, but not as a limited monarch. This time, he was an absolute ruler. And for the next 25 years, the US was his biggest supporter, helping him build up his military and even his brutal secret police, the Savak.
All that oppression, all that resentment, it just boiled under the surface for decades, until, finally, it exploded in the Islamic Revolution of 1979.
And again, don't just take my word for it. Years later, in 2000, the U.S. Secretary of State, Madeleine Albright, stood up and said it herself. She publicly acknowledged the coup was a setback for Iran's political development and that it's easy to see now why many Iranians continue to resent this intervention. That's a huge admission.
So you might be thinking, okay, that was a long time ago. But this isn't just a history lesson. The memory of 1953 isn't ancient history in Iran, it's living history. It's this ghost that haunts the relationship and directly shapes the conflicts we see in the headlines today. And here's a really powerful example of how. For a lot of Iranians, there's a direct line, a straight, unbroken line from the overthrow of Mossadegh in 1953 to the US drone strike that killed General Qasem Soleimani in 2020. They see two very different men from two different eras, but they see the same story.
To them, both were seen as national heroes, standing up for Iran, and both were taken out by the United States. It's seen as a pattern of behavior, proof that America will not allow Iran to have strong, independent leaders. You can see how that single event from 1953 isn't just a memory, it's a wound that's never really healed.
So the crucial point to take away is that if you really want to understand the headlines, all the talk about the axis of evil, the fights over the nuclear program, all of it, you have to understand the secret history of 1953. It's the ghost in the room. And it leaves us with a really tough question to think about. With a history this deep, can that mistrust ever truly be overcome?